All right, we are back. I'm joined again by Aaron. Nice to see you, mate.
How you doing?
Good, good. So, we're going to go straight into our next match because 7th round has started. Who have we got?
We've got Colin Harris, so the other brother. He is playing Lightning, kind of control, kind of aggro, has some options. He's playing against Vince Scanlan.
Yep.
I probably messed up that name
That's
really
all right,
bad.
that's all right.
He's got an interesting Golbears deck. He's playing the Golbears searches for a bunch of 2-drops. And he's playing a whole bunch of cheating in spells off Shulk and Alcid and stuff like that. Kind of cool effects where he gets 2-for-1s in a multicolored deck. He has some powerful backups, some Unas, some Devouts, this kind of stuff that's returning opponents' backups, returning his cool backups, his cool characters from his graveyard back to play. So, should be an interesting matchup.
Cool. I think it's the first mono lightning we've seen, which would be, I don't think we've seen one, especially on stream.
Yep.
There we are, much better.
Mono Lightning's one of the decks mostly built around the Alcid just being like ridiculous.
Yeah.
So built around the synergy with Alcid and Onion Knight and a few other cards that all combo off with that.
Yeah.
Colin's been playing this since the start of Final Fantasy. I think he's played the same deck the whole time. So
so he knows how to play it. He knows what the strengths and weaknesses are. So he's going to have a pretty good idea of where he's in trouble and where he's not. But they're both 6-0, so they both haven't lost yet.
Yeah.
So one of the few players that haven't lost. We had Jai from the last one when him and Jason were both 5-0, and Jason lost that one. So he's now 5-1. So there are a few people who still haven't lost a game.
So it's likely that we'll only have one 8-0 or one potential 8-0. So it's looking like there'll be a lot of 7-1s in the top 8. So these guys are essentially fighting for a top 8 slot right now.
We are seeing that obviously the Smiths drop off when people know that they're not going to continue on, but we've still got a fair few people in there playing, which is nice to see. So we've straight out with is that a Una, and I can't see the other one properly.
Yu-Gi-Oh playmat making it hard for us to see things.
Blue Eyes White Dragon, of course. That's the only Yu-Gi-Oh reference I know, so I'm done there.
It might be a Merylweb. It's single of.
And we have Colin straight into it as well.
With backup.
So they're the same, aren't they? So you can do 2 of the same backups, but you can't do 2 of the same forwards?
So there's a little thing in the top right of the card which shows 3 copies of the card, and that usually means that you can play the same name multiple times. You can play 3 copies onto the battlefield. And
I imagine that's usually for like non-kind of named characters, if that makes
sense.
Yes. Yeah, okay. So that
basically every named character is a singleton, and then the ones that are basic guys that are just existing in the game, you can have 3 of, but that's not a lot of cards.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a slow start, but not completely unexpected.
Yeah, just developing our boards. We are, like, both decks, in a sense, can play very control roles. The Lightning deck has typically been a control deck. It typically just catches back up by the power of Alcid. Just when Alcid comes in, he gets to drop a free hero and blow up another hero. Right. And then you're so far ahead on the board that you just start crushing your opponent.
Steamrolling, build that momentum, and then just keep going. And seems like he's debating what to do here. He's looked at his cards a lot. That's never a good sign. When they keep looking at their cards, but they don't do anything. He's put one down straight there to, I think, hand over turn?
Yep, so he's just developing his backups, but he's not getting an effect out of Fusuya.
There's his third one there for the... he's discarded it, so he's going to play something. We're back to square one.
So Fusuya taps to deal 7,000 damage to forward, and it deals 1 point of damage back to you. So it's a to and from. So Shulk lets you drop a free 2-drop of another color into play, and if you do that, your opponent also has to discard a card.
Yeah.
So pretty cool card advantage going on off that card. And leaving the Facility up gives him good ability to blow up a forward when it comes into play and kind of move to the next turn with multiple forwards of his own. So,
of course, and again, it does come down to that idea of you don't want to take damage, but there are some instances where it's okay. You know what I mean? Like you'll happily take a hit if it means you know, disabling a card that was going to cause you a lot of grief.
Definitely.
Still flicking them cards around. It's never a good sign. He just taps it, so that's through.
Getting back to Alcid.
Heading off now.
So when his Sawyer goes to the graveyard, he gets to return forward back to his hand.
Right, okay. Vince is, I don't know, he's just the body language. He's obviously not getting what he's hoping for here, because it's a lot of nervous taps and stuff like that.
I think they both kind of want to be able to blow up things, and there's nothing in play for them to do that to. So they're kind of both working out their game state, building up things. Yeah,
they're circling each other in the ring, but haven't swung a punch yet. So
yeah, eventually we get to a point where they just have to like play out their hands because they get forced by the game, and then we see Edge and an Almond. So when Edge attacks, can't be blocked by a forward with power 4 or greater. And when it deals damage, you get to untap all your backups. So you can tap all your backups to play like a guy, swing with him, get through, untap all your backups and go again. And you can do things like the Fasoya ability could go twice then in a turn because you could tap it, untap it, tap it, and you know, you get some cool interactions that can happen. And here we have the Alcid turn that we were kind of waiting for, where we have like a 2-for-1 and a big catch up on the board.
You get the feeling they're building up to the kind of the big haymaker. Like it's lots of front loaded building here. They're just kind of circling each other still.
Yeah, definitely. The game's just progressing to a point. Like the second that there's 2 forwards out, the other player is forced to do something about the other player's cards, so they can't afford just to keep taking damage, or the Fasoya is going to do a lot of work, but that comes at a cost of a whole lot of life, so, you know, it's always a trade-off.
Alright, so he's just going to zap the Alcid.
And a Devout. So Devout returns a character with cost 4 or less, so you sacrifice it and it returns something cool.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, and 4's still, you know, reasonably. You know, obviously depending on what it is, but it gives you that, you know, that little bit of, you know, you've got to build up towards using it anyway. So.
Definitely, and I think Vince discarded Alcid of his own, so here's the ability to Alcid ability on his own off the Devout, which is really cool.
So Vince with the 2 damage now, but he seems okay with that. He's pretty comfortable there with the 2 hits.
As long as the board doesn't progress too much further.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of his spells 1-for-1. I don't think he has a lot of spells that really seem to do a whole lot more than 1-to-1 interactions. Obviously, Fasoya can just keep killing guys all the time, but as we've discussed, that has a pretty
it does cost,
severe cost on your life.
And yeah, I think earlier you can get away with it a couple of times to get yourself out of trouble, but obviously when you start to get to that 4-5 damage, you don't want to take the 1 point if you don't have to.
So you can see Vince has like a couple of Leviathans in his hand. I don't know what else is really sitting in his hand, but you know, he has some utility.
Yeah, he's got a couple of basically get out of jail free cards there, so.
Yeah, he can certainly buy some time in this game if that's what he feels he needs to be doing.
Alright, so he's going to attack there. Takes his damage. So he wipes it out there.
The Radia's come into playability.
So he does nullify the X death there as well, which is something he obviously is keen to do. But I don't know if it's going to have that much impact. I think it's just he had to do something, so he figured he might as well use that.
Definitely.
He's up, 3 damage now. Starting to build a little bit, We're hitting that tipping point of when it starts to become a little bit too much.
I think it's until you have like the last point of damage. If you're just trying to push your edge, push your edge, push your edge. You know your opponent's not playing something like a deleter or something like that you have to worry about that last point of damage coming through. So that does impact how you can play the game and how aggressive you can get with the Sawyer.
Hands the turn back over there. Wipes out the forward and just goes straight back to it. Back to thinking. Vince.
What's a tank?
Yeah. It is tough. It just seems to be tough. He's got something out just enough to deal with what's coming. It's a goal bears as well. So is this is the other goal bears? This isn't the goal bears.
So this goal bears finds different 2-drops from your deck. Let me just bring it up quickly.
So he's taken 4 damage now with Vince has. So I know he's pushing his advantage, but he's also slowly tanking that damage. And but look at that! Look at that
So many
forward
guys.
line. Yeah.
Yep. So
He's ready to drop bombs.
when goal bears put into the field, search for up to 4 forwards across 2, each of a different element, and play them onto the field. Their auto abilities will not trigger. So you kind of go from no board to...
Yeah, you go like minion splurge kind of thing. You just suddenly you've got all these little guys out there, and in your current situation,
sometimes that's just enough.
Yeah,
sometimes you just go from nothing to, I'm hitting you for 5 damage in a turn.
Yeah, suddenly it's a gang fight and everyone's piled in on you.
So clearing out some of the little guys.
Just tapping them there.
Returns. We've still got 5 cards in hand.
So he's discarding there.
And there goes that whole field, right? Like, we're back to 1 guy.
So it kind of went back to how we were literally 1 turn ago. Except now Colin has taken a point of damage. Vince up to 4.
That he's got a full 5 backups means that he can really, spend his hand without having to spend too many cards on catching back up.
He's turning everything.
The one of Amon.
He's got the contemplation flick going.
That's always going, right?
Yeah. You can tell when people are comfortable with what's out in there at the moment.
So Amon doles a forward when he comes into play, and then he can tap to dollar forward.
Well.
So he can kind of just like keep the board under wraps.
A little bit control-y there, just
Yeah, between him and Sawyer and some other bits and pieces, he's looking to really stall the board out until he can just expand really wide and take over the games.
Debating what to do here.
So it looks like an Odin, a destroy effect for the Amon.
Colin's still kind of weighing things up here.
Well, Colin had his spell targeting, so he was waiting to see the reaction. And tap all the creatures. Cool.
Lots of honesty, I will say. They're pretty.
Yeah. Well, typically in most games it's untap, then draw your cards. I'm pretty sure that's what they should be doing. Whether they are doing that or not, it doesn't really matter as long as the game state's being maintained.
Yeah.
Like, it matters a little bit.
I think it's just good having that visual representation. Hey, like if you just look at it and go, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, it's easy to get to like combat and you've still got your dude sideways and like that's not really where we want to be. That's not. I don't think Colin has any way to really dull a forward, so I don't expect that to be something that's ever really happening, or definitely isn't freezing them with his lightning deck.
Still just, it's a little bit of argy-bargy, but no huge aggression yet. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot of little counteracting of each other and, trading here and there, but nothing, no huge swings, no particular efforts to, choke him out kind of thing. It's just, a little bit back and forth.
I feel like Vince has a lot of cards. This might be kind of the game that he wants to play.
Yeah. Just keep the options open and just try and sneak one in.
Yo, he always has his big turn where he just like dumps and gets all the stuff from his deck, and then he really forces pressure on responding if he can just keep building guys. Anytime you've got 7 guys on the table, that's pretty tough for your opponent to deal with. Is that Edge? So many one-offs in these decks. So we're just building a board back up, trying to set some defense up on Colin's side. Wiping out all the little guys again.
Colin spent a lot of time cleaning up, just mopping, getting rid of all the little bits of garbage that are lying around and picking them up.
I feel like Vince now has a lot of cards in hand versus what Colin's got. And he's still got an active Fusoyo with like at least one shot that it can take. He might not want to go to 6 damage though. But it feels like he's kind of building into the game that he wants. He's still holding on to the Leviathans, so he can definitely start forcing some damage when he chooses to. That might not be nearly his game plan.
Got the big geese up there, 8,000 power level, so it's acting as a bit of an active deterrent there
from getting in. And there's the first Leviathan. And a Renoa.
So he takes his point there, so he's up to 4 damage now.
So I think Vince has maneuvered into like a pretty good spot across this game. It feels like he's slowly just gaining an advantage on cards and now in board state.
Yeah, it seems like at the start, you saw him happily kind of tanking that damage. And now it's kind of paying off. Like, he does really have, he's kind of sitting where he wants to be, and
I think it's kind of the case of like when 2 controlling decks play each other, the more controlling deck usually takes over.
Yeah.
the time that the control deck comes under, gets itself in a lot of trouble is when the aggro deck is too fast for it, gets underneath its defense.
Yeah,
And that's kind of
down, yeah.
not a thing that happens when you're kind of mid-range control, but they're control.
Yeah.
You know, one player's playing for the really long game. And I think that's what we're seeing here is one game's set up to kind of deal with the aggro decks a whole lot better than the other deck, but when these two match up, you know, it's a big issue for the Lightning deck.
Just double checking all of his cards, making sure, seeing what he's dropped, what he hasn't.
Just kind of waiting. Like there's just tension that builds up while you're waiting for your opponent to work out what they're going to do with their turn.
It's just, yeah, it's interesting to see. So
it's obviously tense. They both know they're playing for a top 8 slot here.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, yeah, at this point, you know, you could probably get in on a 7-1. Like most likely, you're in on.
You're in on a 7-1. You're a lock.
But you don't want to risk it. You know what I mean? You'd rather go in having your 7, and then if you lose one, well, you drop one. If you're one of the few who can get an 8, then good on you.
Well, there'll only be one. That's the way that
works, yeah?
that Swiss works. Is there can only ever be one player that is undefeated.
Right. Okay.
And so it always works out the number of players is so it does it in divisions of 8. So for 8 players, there'd be 3 rounds. Second, you go to 16 for 32-5, etc., etc., etc. And so the rounds are always known by the number of players in the tournament.
Right. Yep. And so obviously you guys got a few more than you thought because you went up from 7 to 8. So
yeah, well, we knew we would be somewhere in the range of 7 and 8. It's whether the tournament was going to be over 128 or under 128. Cool. So Adia's pretty big, has pretty big effect. Its death effect is also big and very significant at this point in the game. Because we have so many backups, we can afford to pay it. Alright, he's not staying around. Was that the Fasoya to go up to 6 points? So I think he took out the... He's on the edge now, so, you know, that Fasoya is now out of the game.
Yep.
And now we're trading blows back and forth, and we're on little guys.
So this is where it pays off or it doesn't. Realistically, like...
Well, we've still got lots of cuts. So there's the Alcid into just take over the game. So this is looking really good for Vince. And Colin's going to need a bit of a miracle at this point to find his way back in. So especially still having a Fasoya in hand and a full grip versus 2 cards, a backup advantage, a forward advantage. It's all one-sided here.
Yeah, I think it's you can just see there's a lot of apprehension with Colin's moves now. What does he do?
He just throws out the last line of defense that he can. If he's got any outs, he plays to them, but he might just be dead to the hit. I think Vince is still just trying to play tight, make sure that he doesn't leave any gaps, any spots.
I guess that is the scary part for him, is that if he does miscalculate, if he does figure out, oh, wait, hang on, and then suddenly there's some magic combination that Colin has, all he has to do is get 1 point. You know, like 1 point of damage will do at this point. So he's got to make sure that he really is as confident as he thinks he is.
Yeah, he's kind of, with the Fasoya, he's kind of using his life as a resource.
Yeah.
In a different way from what other decks are, where your life is the thing that, you know, you're reliant on to keep you alive, but when you start to damage yourself for advantage, it turns into a different kind of a deal, a different kind of setup in your games. It also means sometimes you die really fast.
Yeah. Sometimes
because they're trying to hit you as well as you're hitting you, and you know.
Got a bit of the handshake, so it could be an excitement or it could be a concern. Who knows? The adrenaline's pumping.
I think he's got some options with the Sawyer, whether he wants to return and whether he wants to keep this game going, whether what he needs to do versus one card.
He's back through his deck again. It's getting very tense. He's really, yeah, thinking about this one a lot.
So he just picked up his graveyard and shuffled it and then put it down face. I don't know where his graveyard has disappeared to in all this.
I don't know, like
I think he picked it up, looked at it, and then it's sitting on his left-hand side.
it is, yeah.
It's probably not where it should be.
It's palpable now. He's really kind of. He must be worried. I don't know. He must be worried that there's nothing he can do.
Well, I think he knows that there's things he can do. It's deciding what the best option is right here. He kind of feels there's a lot of pressure, like he's meant to win here.
Colin's waiting now, just playing the waiting game.
There we go. There's the return, as we expected. Then the deck goes face out.
Colin takes his extra point there.
And it's that with one forward, it's going to take a little while to produce a lot of damage. I think that's his.
So Colin's drawing now.
So we've still got the Alcid now sitting in hand, so. Cool, so he's blowing up.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, there we go.
For the camera, showing off now.
Cool.
That's all right. Well, there you go.
Well done to Colin.
Well done. Well, yeah, we didn't think he could do it, and there he managed it. So, I guess it was. That's the gamble. When you take your life, you wonder whether it's you're going to build up enough to kill your enemy, and in this instance, no.
Yeah,
it's
hard to know whether the Sawyer is costing you more than what it's gaining you. I feel like a lot of scenarios it probably is, or probably is if Vince is sitting at 6-0. But in that game, you just gotta put him on the edge. And that was enough.
There you go. Well, yeah, Colin takes it. Congratulations to him. So he's now 7-0. So he's pretty much a lock for
he is 100% lock.
There you go. So we have Colin definitely in the top 8, and then we have one more round of Swiss to go.
So one of the New South Wales guys is definitely in the top 8.
Wow, and see, there you go.
What under Colin from
Wollongong?
Pride,
right? Okay, state pride is how it works. No worries.
Yeah, a little bit.
So we'll thank you very much, Aaron. We'll be joined by one of the other guys very soon, and we'll see you after a break.
See ya.